Yeah. Sweet deal. Got it. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the official kickoff, I suppose, of 2022 Aftercamp. We'll do the quick plug here, and then we'll kind of hop into the stuff you're here for. So if you have stumbled upon this meetup or recording, this is the Aftercamp meetup. Aftercamp is something Rachel and I started, oh gosh, I suppose like a year and a half ago now already. We got really obsessed with this idea of post bootcamp graduation, post CS graduation, and really self-directed learners getting into the market. And kind of an interesting problem. Actually, I can kind of just update you on some findings of things that we have discovered. And largely what we're figuring out after talking to countless companies is that really it's not necessarily the learners that are where the biggest gap is. It's actually the companies and being equipped to mute the dog there. Okay. It's actually the companies that are needing help figuring out how to bring on junior talent. And so Rachel and I have like shifted gears a lot of times through this Aftercamp journey. We've tried to keep the Aftercamp meetup consistent. So apologies for taking a break, but I had surgery last month, so I had to like just take a minute and just recoup. But so really the way that we're looking at this whole problem in this industry right now is we're really just like obsessed with like talking to companies and learning all about pain points they have on bringing on new talent, because everyone universally, like I think one of the biggest problems that most companies see right now is like, we've all tried to do this hire outpace senior thing. The market continues to get rate increases. In fact, Alan and I were just talking about this as before everyone came on. You know, Rachel and I will notice almost every quarter at this point significant changes in the way that the market is hiring engineers. And so, you know, you'll see things like pay increase. You'll see things like really the interview process is like in the process of changing quite a bit. But at this point, I don't know about y'all, but like I see anywhere between 60 to 100 requests on LinkedIn a day in my inbox for, hey, do you want to shift gears? You want to become a, dev for us, that sort of thing. So it is this market is unlike any market I've ever seen in the, the 12, 13 years I've been doing this. It's been nuts. So I think Aftercamp has the right mission. I think as we continue to look at, see how we help companies, I think the big thing that Rachel and I have talked quite a bit about is making sure that we're keeping the meetup warm. And, we're probably moving into this phase two, looking and seeing what more can we be doing, as we get into 2022, but we'll keep you all updated. I think that this meetup tonight is kind of an interesting meetup because I think one of the best ways to quote unquote attack this problem of getting engineers into the market is really leveling up the abilities of people here at Aftercamp, but also just like generally starting a conversation and talking about what does it mean to be a good engineering manager. Now, it's interesting because engineering management is not something that like you get a playbook for when you get promoted. Most of the time, and this is sort of cliche at this point, is that people will get promoted to be a manager based off their technical ability, not necessarily their people ability. And so if you are in that boat, it's kind of hard. Like you want to be a good manager, but like we typically slide back to our defaults of like, what does it mean to be a good engineer? And this problem, quote unquote problem, has been kind of perpetuated over the years where people who are put into these management engineer spots are now directors and vice presidents, and they're promoting the same way, which is part of the reason why the market is having the problem that it is that like, how do you bring on junior talent when you haven't really established yourself as like an awesome leadership organization that is capable of growing talent? Now, there are definitely companies figuring this out. I'm not bucketing everybody into this. I've seen, incredible small companies just really manage the heck out of their team in a positive way. And I've seen big companies fail at it as well too. So we're kind of all over the spectrum, but I want to start the conversation tonight just talking about the people side of this. So it'll definitely have a technical slant as well too. We'll definitely get into a lot of like the tech side of engineering management, but I think maybe the biggest surprise, or maybe the not biggest surprise, is that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about like humans is a big piece of this. Lots of really cool faces. It's so exciting to see. Yeah, Alex, I'm looking at you specifically. I'm looking at Alex specifically. Super great to see Sarah. Sarah, I haven't seen you in like years, so it's great to see you online too. And some new faces as well. So just really quick on this too, like I will probably insert quite a few pauses in this chat just because I would love conversation in this topic. So questions that you have. Since Sarah's here too, I think that she's got probably some awesome perspectives on some engineering management. I'd love to hear from anybody tonight as we go through this. So let me actually just get a screen share going. I got like a light slides. Mostly you guys know me. I just use Lucid Chart for just pretty much everything in life. So I have a small kind of Lucid Chart visual to go through and talk about this area to kind of be the centralizing conversation point for tonight. So with that, Aftercamp Meetup engineering management session. Congrats, you're now in charge of humans, which is basically the way it feels when you get promoted to kind of be that manager. So out of the gate, we're just going to kind of talk, get going on the topics here. I think just such an interesting piece of this is just the human side of engineering management is like something that can elude a lot of new engineering managers, right? Because we get promoted typically because of our engineering abilities, but those people skills are typically something that needs to be grown and engaged. And we're not used to being bad at something, especially if you're killing it as an engineer. It's weird that all of a sudden you're in this role where it's got an entirely new skill set that like is not grown and not developed. So I definitely want to center the conversation on this point. So a few quick notes I have about this. So I got the stickies up, I got some conversations points up, and then I'll kind of like pause at each yellow sticky and just see if anyone wants to insert anything through chat or through unmuting yourself and chatting. There's this concept that I bring to a lot of the managers I develop. And it's just this idea that like one of the traps we fall in as an employee is that we forget sometimes that the person on the other side of the screen, I used to say on the other side of the table, but the other side of the screen, because most of us are remote, like they have a whole life that we are not like aware of. And there's some really cool studies on children and babies specifically that like this idea of like persistence of other humans is kind of eludes babies, like, right? You like hold the like the blanket in front of your face and all of a sudden like dad doesn't exist anymore. You take the blanket away and dad exists again. But this is like the same kind of thing with employees. Like as soon as you get off this call, I need to remember that Josh is going to go like live his life, and he's got his own concerns. He's got his own family he's gonna be thinking about. He's got his own hopes and dreams. He has his own like everything. And like that's important to understand as a manager, because like how you structure conversation, how you structure engagement, like will do a lot to that person outside of like the conversation that you have. And I'm like, I know as kind of like a person who has struggled with like mental health before, struggle with anxiety. We all go through bouts of that, some of us more extreme than others. Like a manager would have a conversation with me and I'd be like fearing for my job after that, because like I was reading something that the way that she acted or the way that she said something, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I know Rachel can like probably even think to like specific anxiety times when I'd be like, hey, my manager, she said this, and like I don't see her again for 2 weeks. And so you spend 2 weeks stressed out in job hunting because you're afraid that you're gonna get fired. And so one of the things that I tell people right away when they become managers is like, hey, be ultra cognizant of what your role means to the humans that you interact with, and honor the fact that they have their life that they're going to live too. And we'll get into a little bit of like, we'll see that seed and thread that into a lot of other points. But like, I saw, who said it? Rolanda had said, same. And I think that was in response to freaking out when a manager says something. But I guess just like through like head nod or thumbs up or something, like, do you know what I'm talking about? Has anyone had that kind of feeling of just like reading their manager and like really like maybe more than any other human? Yeah, Timothy, I see that for sure. So I guess the first like kind of sticky note that I want to pull up here, I actually have these stickies pre-filled out. I just bought a mechanical keyboard and I'm like, I bet you they do not want to hear me clicky clack and fill these things out, but I also like want to put these things as we go. So the first point is just like understand that the people, the humans that you interact with, they have families, they have hopes, they have dreams, hobbies, plans. And ultimately, we're going to talk a lot about what you can provide to that human. And that's going to be largely purpose. So many internal convos and arguments. Oh my gosh. And external, Rachel. We talk a lot too. So what you're going to be able to provide as a manager is you're going to be able to really fill in this gap of purpose and like really like empowering employees to see their value in their work. The next sticky note here, kind of this next bullet point, is people value relationships. And it's because very simply, they get something out of it, right? Like, you know, if you think about it, you know, you think about like, why do we engage with other people? It's typically because we believe that we're going to get something out of that engagement. And like, whether that be like social constructs, like, you know, walking through the office and you're grabbing a water and you walk by a coworker, but like, oh, hey, how's it going? Like that social exchange is just to meet status quo. Or you walk up and pay the cashier at the gas station. That's to meet like social norms of like, you got to like behave like this. Otherwise it's like socially acceptable, in some cases illegal. But when we think about the relationships that we engage in at a professional level, like typically it is like a needs-based thing. I believe that this person can solve the business problem, so I'm going to go to them. Or, you know, we believe that like they are the ticket to something else that maybe not business related, maybe it's like career progression. Very rarely do we engage in anything with other humans that doesn't have some sort of like connection to like us bettering our position. So the reason I bring this up is because this last sticky note here is that like it's interesting because your employees' engagement with you is basically like set on the precedent that they have to like, it's a condition of their employment. I need to go meet my new manager because if I don't, like that would be weird. And that could like set me back in my career. Can you imagine skipping like the meeting of your manager? It would be weird. Or not participating in like the being managed activities. So like one-on-ones, annual reviews, that sort of thing. So flipping that, like in thinking about being a manager, is if the reason they're meeting with you initially is condition of employment, that's the benchmark and that's the thing that you want to get past. So like two things, I guess two notes here. The first is in this people relationship side of things, what are you going to give to your employees, right? Like that's kind of the question and the thing that you need to be thinking about as you're managing other humans. And then that leads into the second one, which is to make sure that the goal of this building relationships with other people, your employees, is to give them something that they value more than just employment. So think about the best manager you have ever had and think about what sets them apart from the worst manager that you've ever had. And chances are there's something in there that you got something from the better manager that you didn't get from the not so great manager. And yeah, definitely the key differentiator between for the great resignation, Sarah, I feel that in my soul, is that right now, especially, like money could be an indicator, but really, I think what people are looking for 2 years into this pandemic is something more than money. And that something is a really interesting, it could be management, it could be opportunity, it can be a lot of things. We'll get into different but people very rarely quit when they're being managed exceptionally well. Now, the trade-off to that is if they're being managed exceptionally well, they're quitting because they're taking something more responsibility with probably a greater title. Yep. And Rachel, you know really well. I mean, you're as hot in the middle of Rachel, obviously tech recruiter for a good time. You know, she spends her days talking to people who are looking at their next thing. Just getting caught up on comments here too. Mentorship and sponsorship, absolutely. You know, it's one of the biggest things I always say too. Like, you know, the one things like I look for in my roles, I'm telling my bosses all the time, I'm like, what can I do to get more time spent with you or this person who I believe I can get something from? I can write code for a lot of people right now. There's a lot of options out there to write code. Once again, 60 to 100 people knocking down your door a day on LinkedIn. Like they all like there are plenty of places to go do what I do for nerdery. But the reason I choose to stay engaged with nerdery is because the other humans that I interact with, could be my manager, could be peers, but as a manager, when you become a manager, you want to be thinking an awful lot about like the quality of interaction and what it is that you're going to give your team. And so, quick story, and I'll kind of open it up to whoever wants to chat here. There was a job I took out here in Kansas City at a group called Artisan Technology Group. And largely, I didn't know, and we didn't know what role, like I wasn't interviewing for the director of engineering role. I was just interviewing with Artisan. And ultimately we landed on, the vice president needed help with the engineering team. He had like 30 direct reports. And then he had within that organization, he had 2 other parts of the organization as well too. So they had asked me like, hey, what would you think about being a director of software engineering? The very first thing I did in that very first month is I scheduled one-on-one time with every one of those 30 people that that were available somewhere on vacation and whatnot. But like, hey, I just want to schedule 30 minutes with you. And the only question I asked that led to incredible conversation was, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because I want to help you get there. And like, that was like the whole like setup for our relationship was that question, because it's such a crazy question, because like, obviously like there's like the novelty of it, like, haha, I'm an adult, I am a grown up. But like, honestly, like, think about that yourself. Like, what are you working toward? And the answer changes all the time, by the way. Like there's never a right answer to that. And even if you don't have an answer professionally, like chances are you have a response personally. And that's a great answer. Like just being like, hey, you know what? I'm focusing on family right now. And that's like the extent of it. That's totally great. So, but basically what I signaled to everybody was like, actually, I really care about you as a human. And I don't want to talk about Artisan at all. I just want to talk about what it is that you want to be doing. And it was something I'd read from somewhere, and it was great. I loved it, and they loved it, and it was good. But the whole point of that was, who are you as a human, and help me understand what it is, like how I can be of service to you. People begging you to code for them. I wish I had that problem still learning. Rolanda, you will get there. I know you and I have like talked about this a bit. It's that first job is always the hardest to get. Once you get it, you're golden. I promise. Service oriented management for sure. Just watching the chat. It's coming in. Okay. So thinking about, yeah, JavaScript is its own craziness. It'll come iteration. And I see you on LinkedIn going through those reps. Those reps are everything. What are some common responses I got to that opener? Mostly confusion. A lot of people didn't know what to do with that question. A lot of people don't are like, oh, like, I think people sometimes, especially as they got to know me, they like felt really like I'm a high energy dude. I get that. I'm like a really like studious person as well too. And I think that's what people see online, at least, on LinkedIn. I'll be like, or like I get excited about a book and I'll tell people about it. I get excited about a course, I tell people about it. And I think people fixate on that stuff sometimes. And what they don't see is like, it all comes in waves. I talk about learning in waves quite a bit. I have definitely gone through a World of Warcraft wave, just like mindless. Yeah, Rachel's laughing at me. Just like it gets so busy sometimes, or get so overwhelmed. Like I just need to go kill orcs for 30 minutes and I'll be good. I promise. I'm kind of getting over that wave. And I recently actually, we got our first iPad in the house, and we just never had one before. So I figured out all these learning sites actually have good apps, and rather than like the Kindle Fire version of the apps, which kind of stink. And so like we've been really into like watching Skillshare. And so I've been like, we're like watching like t-shirt making stuff, like that kind of stuff, but it's fun to watch. And so I kind of find this new wave of like learning I'm getting into, which is really cool. Anyways, so going back to the question is that, I think that there's a sense of guilt that I sensed when people first would get asked that question. And then I just bring up a lot of like the stuff, I talked about in Aftercamp quite a bit. Like, it is okay to have balance in your life. It is okay to like go kill orcs. And so I find that like telling people both the good and the bad, like I don't want to show you the highlight reel of learning. I want to show you the highlight reel of like my life. And I found in those conversations that it became really a lot more important to not fixate on the biggest like impressive like career pieces, but more of like yep, tried to cook a steak tonight and totally wasted $30 because I screwed it up. Like, I think like being, and not false humility, but like real humility, I think is like super important. So once we get past all that, like get past like the guilt and we get past like the kind of like, no, it's cool. Like, like I think the thing, I leave people with would be like, hey, what, I've got like an incredibly deep background in building curriculum and helping people get to where they want to be. And I like authentically, like as a human, want to help however I can. I can't do it all for you. Like there's no way I can, but if I can expedite you and get you closer to where you want to be, then like, I want to do that for you. And then I think that the natural progression that most people like have in those relationships with me is like, is this dude fucking for real? Like, is this dude is it, what's this dude's problem? Like, is he like really like this all the time? So, I think that it takes time to earn people's trust. Yeah, it makes a huge difference when people actually care about me. Yeah. Yep. And at least I think that like that oddly, it makes you want to work harder for them. I think, it also just makes the work more meaningful, right? Like, I think, we're going to talk about motivators, and I think people having like this sense of purpose and that they're seen and that are all really important things. And being seen as an employee is really, really hard to do when everything's as business as usual. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Yep, absolutely. Yep, it's give a shit, right? Like, I think, building those relationships really like it empowers people to know that like their work is going to mean something to somebody. And I think, the conversation I was having earlier today at work with a group of leaders was one of the things that Western culture is craving so desperately right now is authenticity, right? Social media has cheapened interaction quite a bit. I think that like there are plenty of non-authentic interactions. I think that Western work culture has a song and dance that we do. It's like when you get somebody who's authentic, it's really meaningful, right? It really makes a big difference. And you will talk about this more tonight, but like just balancing the authenticity and like connecting with the human with like business purpose is important too. Like, people don't want to hear that they're doing a good job all the time. People want to know how to do their job and how to be better, and they want to grow, right? Like, if you hear you're doing a good job all the time, it gets kind of sickening. Like, well, how do I do more? Like, how do I like get more responsibility, and how do I continue to progress? Finding how a person gives a ruler to care. Yep. Love languages. Yeah, we'll get. Yeah, you guys are following on. Okay, let's actually talk about one-on-ones for just a second. So we kind of been talking around one-on-ones, but there are a couple core things. I think that they're like core systems or ceremonies you engage as a manager. I think like review cycles are one of them. One-on-ones are another. And there's a rule that I put in place with all my managers. So if I'm in charge of managers who are in charge of people, this is a rule I like to put in place. The first is, don't you dare ever miss a one-on-one. I don't care what the hell you have going on. I don't care if it's a client. I'd rather reschedule the client before I'd reschedule the employee. And that's such like a shock to people. But like, think about it. Have you ever had a manager cancel a one-on-one? Yeah, it feels gross. Yeah, it feels really, really gross. Yeah, people do it. And what's worse is that people will do it without context. So they're like, inevitably, I always get asked the question, well, what if like I'm sick, or what if like a comet strikes my car and I gotta like sort that out with the comet police, whatever you guys could do. This is the crappy example. You get the idea. I'm like, okay, if you're gonna miss a one-on-one, you schedule it earlier, not later. You don't kick it back, you kick it up. And when you kick it up, you make sure that you send out a note saying, hey, I need to mess our regular scheduled one-on-one time, but it is super important that I meet with you. And rather than schedule it later, I'd love to meet with you sooner. By the way, no false pretense. I just authentically can't wait to talk to you. Like, yeah, bump it into oblivion, or like, oh, hey, this is so close to your other one-on-one, we're just gonna cancel one. Well, you should just cancel in the first place. Make it sooner, not later. And I think like it's going to be really awkward at first. We're going to talk about more one-on-one stuff here in just a second. But like once you get this rhythm of a good one-on-one, like people will get, oh yeah, like I can't wait to talk to Rachel. I can't wait to meet with my boss. Because we are talking about this thing and I'm excited to have that conversation. Like that's the point that you want to get to. So don't ever miss, like a big period, like non-negotiable, whatever you need to do, make it happen. And if you can't make it happen at that time, you schedule it earlier, not later. This is a really hard one. Yep, manage up for sure. Always have something to talk about. Have you ever been on one-on-one and you're like, this is awkward, what are we going to talk about for like the last 20 minutes? You ever had that one-on-one? Some nods, yes, for sure. So there's this thing that I did in that same director role that I was talking about. Luckily, the team was local. They were here in Kansas City. And so I said to Rachel, I was like, Rachel, I'm going to go to Barnes & Noble and I'm going to buy 8 copies of this book. And we spent the entire Saturday and we just drove around Kansas City dropping off this book to all my managers. And so they like hand delivered a copy, met all my managers in person, hand delivered a copy of this book. And so what I did was I had said, hey, read chapter 1. And it was just like a random leadership book. It was, I think it was the 21 Laws of Leadership. I think it's by John C. Maxwell. And I was like, read chapter 1. It's like 3 pages, not a big deal. We're going to talk about it, right? And so anytime we ran out of things to talk about in a one-on-one, we talked about the book. We talked about the law of leadership. And we had said, we basically just had a conversation. I wasn't teaching anything. I was just like, let's talk about this law. Let's like talk about like what John C. Maxwell has to say. And if we finish talking about it, like, great, let's talk about law 2 next week. Or next, if you're on a bi-weekly, in 2 weeks, let's talk about law 2. And what I found in about 9 months of managing that team, I only made it to about law 3 with all of them because we always had something to talk about. We always were having space filled with like tangible things that were happening at the company. Or talking about their life. We did get to kind of a good relationship with these folks where they were telling me about like stuff that was going on, and it was great. And so I think a lot of times people kind of punt on this. I see parent managers punt on this quite a bit. I'm not saying you need to go out and buy a book, but I am saying is if you plan ahead and you have a topic at hand, it can be, well, cool. We covered all the base stuff for this one-on-one. Let's talk about the book. Let's talk about that article. Let's talk about let's talk about something specific related to the industry, because what that signals to the employee is like, I don't have anything more important than you, and that's the way you want them to feel. I mean, it's the way I want to feel. Is I want to feel like I'm the most important person in the room, and I think business does a good job of squashing that the second after you get hired, because like they'll make you feel like $1 million when they do a job offer, but then like essentially like it's all about the business, and maybe one day out of 365 on your review day it'll be about you. But like you have the power as a manager every 2 weeks or every week or whatever to make that 30 minutes or an hour all about them and about their growth, and like that feels good. It feels like you're being invested into. Talk about something enriching. Yeah. Status update or chit chat or freaking event fests. Yeah. I think event fests can be, I think it's important. I have like a whole like talk track on event. Sarah, you might have to chime in on that one. Event fests. Good in moderation. Okay. Thank you. I was waiting for that, but I don't want to like, yeah. Yes. Keyway for sure. I feel that. Okay. So we're kind of like hinting at this idea that really the one-on-ones, they should drive growth. They should be all about Like the question of what do you want to be when you grow up is really all about this. And we're going to talk about this in a second about like what growth plans could look like. But one-on-one should be about not status updates. Like status updates are important. Like, hey, here's how the business is functioning. But once all that stuff is done, what are we doing to move you forward? Is like a really important question. By the way, also one-on-ones, I could also add take copious notes. I think this is a super important one. And I think it's important to organize those notes as well too. Like I talked about before that like your employees are people. And so if another human gives you a detail about their life, you damn well better remember it or have it written down or some sort of refresher. Like if somebody, your employee, gives you their kid's name or their spouse's or significant other's name, like write it down. You should know if they give you an important date, like, hey, my wedding, is in 2 weeks. Great. You should remember that date for once their anniversary, because it's important to know what is going on in their life that may or may not be affecting them. I think it's to the extent that you're allowed to, like, right. They give you those pieces of information. It's if they trust you with that information, it's your responsibility to hold on to that information. And so take notes. Recently, I got caught up with one of my managers. I had left Artisan, but we had a conversation on a Saturday, and he is like got a kid on the way, and his girlfriend is now his fiance, and like his whole world just changed in like 7 months. And I was like, dude, you're like a different person. It was cool. I wrote down, like, they already know like their kid's name was what's going to be. I wrote it down because I was like, when I follow up with them, we also have the due date. So like Rachel and I are going to send a baby package because you know what? Like that person's worth it. Like that human is worth it. And what's it going to cost me? Like $20, like maybe, but like, how does that feel? Like being like having somebody who like reaches out and cares about you like that way. Okay. Which is also kind of this next sticky note, be in a position yourself to give. I think this is a really interesting one because if you ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're bought in that you're going to help that person get there. What are you going to do to like help them? And so people are motivated by different things. So you got to be aware about that. Like, can you give what they're asking for is a really important thing. So if you, for example, I'm going to use the easy one just because it's not a reality, but people think it is. Like somebody wants more money, right? Like I'm really motivated by money. Like they think they are, but they aren't. That's a whole other conversation. Are you in a position as a manager to like give them more money? And are you setting up the path to like, are you drawing that line out for them that says, here's how you get more? By the way, this can also be like, hey, they want recognition. Are you in a position to give recognition? Most of us are. Like this person's really motivated when they're seen. Like I want to make sure that they're seen. Like, can you position yourself to give them what they're ultimately looking for? And by the way, it changes, right? I gave an example of the manager before who is now getting married and having a kid on the way and all that great stuff. Totally different set of priorities. Totally different. Before he wanted money, and now he wants balance. Like that's the important thing. In order to get and figure those things out in those one-on-ones, you got to do something real simple. You got to listen. And you got to listen for stuff that is not overt. You might have to draw conclusions. You might have to like really read in between the lines sometimes. And like, listen, you have to also be fluid and adapt because you're going to get it wrong. Like I think as a manager, you get it wrong a lot. But the point is that you're engaged. And the point is that you're looking for subtleties. You're active listening for sure. You are not listening to respond. You're listening to absorb and understand this person better. That's super important. And then obviously figure out what their motivations are. I think that's like the next sticky that we have been talking around. And once you figure it out, like, damn it, deliver on it. Like, like, I mean, like, don't be the person who holds any of that. Like give abundantly if you can give abundantly. Like obviously you can't give like abundantly of money, but like if somebody has earned more money, like you're like can justify to the business, like they're asking for $5,000 more. And like, I think we should do it. Like go to bat for them and deliver it, not an annual review cycle. Like I can tell you it is a load of fun to pull somebody into a one-on-one and be like, hey, by the way, you had asked for, you're trying to get get to this place financially. We got you there. Like, not like we got you there in a major way. You asked for 5,000, we were able to get you 10. Like that will blow somebody away. So I think really like understanding that part of your job is to deliver on the motivations of your people is like a super not obvious thing, but kind of obvious once you hear it. Advocate for your team. Oh my God, yes. You are the only person who can. They can advocate for themselves, but you have power. You have power in your role. Okay, grow your people. Obviously, you knew I was going to have a growth section in here. This is where I want to get a little more techie, and just kind of like here's some, as a person who has taught a lot of people tech, there are two things that I try to do with every team member. I try to put them on what I call the 2x4. This is like a Scott Bermander thing. This is not a thing you can Google. So I'm talking about specifically developers here. So 2x4, I try to put them on two different spectrums. The first is there's something I call the 4 architectures. There's syntactical architecture, there's algorithmic architecture, software architecture, and system architecture. I'm going to break this down really quick. Syntactical architecture is all about how well did they structure a line of code? Like how well is that line of code written? The second is algorithmic, and this is more of writing a function or a method. And can they take a grouping of syntax and make a method or function or algorithm or a series of functions? And like, can they solve a problem, and how do they structure that? The third is a group of algorithms makes a software, right? This is like an app that you create, either like a front end app or a back end app, or something that says, I'm making an API, let's say. And so in order for me to make an API software, I need a set of algorithms that accomplish that are made up of a set of syntaxes. And then finally, there's a system architect. So how does a grouping of softwares come together to make a system, a cohesive system? And I try to place people on here and kind of figure out where's their head at. And I think, there's, this is from earlier conversation. Typically I see software engineers kind of like, maybe it's a little bit like this. This is adjusted for the purposes of the conversation, but typically your introductory SE, actually, let's go back. I think this is worth noting. This is where I typically see ASEs, or associate software engineers, or I don't like using the word junior, but somebody who's new to programming. They typically lean heavy syntax, and they like start to really get the handle on algorithms, but like composing entire software is something that they still need a lot of help with. Where a software engineer is moving, they can actually put together some small like softwares, right, without a lot of assistance. But you see them start to slide away from like best practices and algorithms. I can tell you, as like a senior software engineer or principal software engineer, you typically see them slide up even more. Where like ask a PSE to solve a like leak code problem, and you get a varying set of responses or varying results. But where, when I talk to somebody, I'm kind of trying to figure out like, where are they in this process? Where is their head at? And I don't, by the way, this isn't like set in stone. This is just more of a conversation piece. So don't get fixated on this, but where are they? Where is their head at? Like, where do they, what level are they thinking about things at? The second, go ahead. Oops, somebody chimed in.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. No, you're totally fine. The second one is going to be the full stack, right? I call it full stack plus, and I'll explain that in a second. So typical web application has 4 components. Front end is going to be like your HTML, CSS. Client will typically be JavaScript and some sort of combination with a framework. Server is going to be like your .NET, your Spring, your Django, your Python, your Flask, your Node, etc. And then of course your database. This will be like your SQL and NoSQL solution. And so they have some level of proficiency, if you're working, Aftercamp is about web development. So assuming that you're here for web development conversation, the people you manage will probably be specialized in one or multiple parts of this stack. I say full stack plus now. I feel like the conversation is expanding quite a bit. One of the things I'm seeing in postings quite a bit is some sort of cloud requirement. That's the first plus. The second plus I'm typically seeing is DevOps as well too. It's like a full damn IT team at this point. But where are they at in the full stack plus spectrum? And I actually call it more of a spectrum because I feel like you're going to very rarely have somebody who's very DevOpsy who doesn't know any of this middle but knows front end. I feel like obviously, like, if you're cloud or DevOps, you're kind of really more back and focused and slide your way forward. You might be talking to a developer who is like, I only ever want to write CSS. And I know lots of people who like that, who just love styling. That is like, they're like on top of the newest CSS framework. They are like literally like best practicing the hell out of me with CSS and telling me why my CSS is ratchet. Like they are, that's their jam. I always joke, there are two things I don't do: PHP and CSS. Like I don't do either of those things. I don't like doing them. I will framework always when I have the option to do any kind of like front end CSS. But figuring out where they are and where they want to be, I think is super important. And I think that when you are talking about growing your people, getting them on the 2x4 is like super important. Just to like, it just goes back to this old metaphor I always say: if you want to get to point B, you really need to understand point A. And if I haven't said it in this chat already, I'm going to say it for the first time now, and probably repeat myself a couple of times. Your people are not you. Meaning like what you want for your life is not going to be what other people want for their life. And you need to like honor exactly whoever they want to be, right? And I think sometimes we fail as managers, where we try to project ourselves onto our wants and desires onto them. Like, you need to learn Rust, because if you don't learn Rust is amazing as a programming language. And if you don't learn Rust, you're worth nothing to me. I know managers like that. Yeah, I see some people like smiling, laughing. They know managers like that. So like, put people, figure out where they are, figure out their point A. And that's a really hard thing. If you guys go way back to the very first talk I did in Aftercamp about Sala, the growth framework, I talk about self-awareness being that really critical first piece. And so you're kind of creating self-awareness for, like, you're trying to help them surface where they are right now. So I'm going to make this investment in a person. I ask them what they want to be when they grow up. I figured out where they are. And now we're going to start talking about how to get them to be where they want to be. And so you start thinking about the growth plan. Like, what is it going to take to get, like, how do I get them from point A to point B? What's the mode of transportation? And that ends up being the growth plan. And the thing I've always repeated several times in the Aftercamp meetups is there are 3 components needed to any growth plan that you have to have. The first is structure, and this could be curriculum. The second is accountability, and the third is community. Now, that doesn't mean you can't succeed without these, and I'll break them down here in just a second, but it typically means that if you have all 3 of these things that are worked, like, growth will explode. So first is structure and curriculum. Like, if you're going to learn something new, like, I want to be a gardener, right? I want to grow plants. You go out and you buy the stuff, and you get the stuff. Like, you don't just like automatically like do gardening. Like, at the very bare minimum, what you'll do is you'll read the back of the seed packets or read the directions. Be like, how do I grow these cucumbers? How do I grow, Rachel, what's all that stuff I probably killed for you? What else did we grow? Peppers. Peppers were a huge success.
You killed bamboo.
I did kill bamboo. But you read the back of the packet, hopefully. You know, that's curriculum, right? And then if like you want to invest more into it, chances are you'll start to go like Google, like, how do I grow bamboo? And you get like start to see best practices for growing bamboo. But like, structure and like having curriculum is really, really important. I know it sounds super weird, but like a lot of times people would be like, I want to learn .NET. Okay, maybe not .NET. Maybe that's not what they're saying they want to learn. I really want to learn Node. And you're right, it is a talent. It takes forever to kill bamboo, for sure. I thought you were talking about Node. I'm like, yeah, Node is a talent. And I read the rest of the message. Screw you, Josh. No. But being good at finding curriculum and finding structure is I joke about it, but it is a skill. It's like, because the trick is that not all structure and curriculum is made the same. So the very basic example here is like, think back to the best teacher you ever had and what separated him from the worst teacher you ever had. And I'm sure in there somewhere, the best teacher probably made learning a lot of fun. It made it accessible and easy. And by the way, that all that shit exists in books too. Like, there are good authors and bad authors. There are teachers who can connect the dots for you, and there are those who can't. Meaning that, like, PS, like, the point I'm trying to make here is, if you've ever taken an online course and you just don't get it, it's not completely your fault. It's not completely on you. Like some books are shit. I'll be completely frank with you. Some courses are bad. So structure curriculum and finding that stuff and surfacing that stuff. The second thing you need is accountability. And like the thing I always say is that like discipline is the thing that keeps you moving forward long after that initial surge of motivation is there. So like once motivation gives out, what keeps you engaged? And discipline can be the answer, but like accountability can be the answer to habit. Yep. If you read Atomic Habits, is an amazing book. Talks about the like neuroscience of like establishing good habits. But like, is the habit holding you accountable? Is it discipline that's holding you accountable? Is it another person holding you accountable? By the way, like the K-12 system really screwed us up because like grades were the thing that made us accountable, or our parents, right? Like those were the two big threats of like if you got bad grades, like that would lead to something potentially negative at home, or, you know, positive equal for positive, whatever your situation is. But so much of our accountability system as learners is based in something that doesn't exist as an adult. We don't have grades as adults. There's nothing forcing you to engage in content. Yeah, PTSD for sure. I can go on and on about that. But when you think about like, and this is going to be the really hard part, really, like as a manager, is when you're managing people who want to grow, like what is going to make them do it is a really interesting question. And sometimes the answer is like, look, like as a company, we would love for you to grow, but in order for us to get an ROI from your employment, like we need you focusing on these things too. Like we need you focusing on things that you already know how to do. Ultimately, you know, pointing at this last sticky here, like you as a manager ultimately are not responsible for their growth. They are. You can enable them, but like you can't do it for them. You can't make them do it. Like they have to, like I can't tell you as a manager how much I've invested into people going to like trainings or taking training courses that had zero or little return. Like it's just kind of the way that things are, because there are a lot of things that I know as a manager now, like I didn't know back then. They're like, oh, in order for that like learning to stick, like I need to like actually put them on a project that like where they get to use that. What if they don't watch that? You know, you're telling me if they just watch the tutorial, they're not going to learn it, like that kind of stuff. Anyways, so accountability, I think, is the trickiest one, I think, to get right as a manager. And the answer is different for every situation. I couldn't even pretend to tackle it all in this conversation. But accountability needs to be there nonetheless. Like what is going to help that employee stay motivated and on track to get this stuff done? And sometimes you can carrot, but like, what's it going to be? Last thing is community in these three things series. And community can mean a lot of things. I think it can mean peers, it can mean teachers, but the whole point of community is that they expedite you through the learning process, right? This is what a good senior developer does really well, is that they come over to your desk and you're like, hey, I have this question. Like they're about to expedite you through years of knowledge, hopefully, if they're good. I'd even remember finishing a lecture at Prime. It would be 2 hours on the introduction to APIs. And like, and if you understand APIs in 2 hours, congratulations, you learned in 2 hours. It took me 2 years to learn. But that's the power of community, right? The power of somebody saying, let me expedite you through, you know, hours, days, months, years of lessons, and I'll just give you the answer for free. That's huge. And when you have the opportunity to like ask questions, like that's what structure and curriculum can't do. Structure and curriculum can deliver content to you on your own terms, but what community can do is can address those lessons you need to learn when that's contextually relevant. Here's what I mean by that: is if you watch an hour lecture, right, and you go back to your desk and you're like, okay, I'm gonna program the thing I just saw. Like, there's no way you absorb that full hour, and so you get stuck, you know, 5% in or whatever, and you're like, what was that again? And so you go back and watch the lecture, but you're like, oh, that's what they meant. But you had to like go through that 5% to get to that point. Versus if somebody was sitting next to you, like, what was that again? They're like, okay, cool. Now you're ready to hear the answer. Let me teach you more about that place. So structure, accountability, community. I'll write those in real quick. Oops. It's the only one I didn't have in here. School PTSD, annual reviews, man. Ugh. Okay. Motivators are different for everybody. I think this is like, it sounds super obvious. It's not. Like, I think, like, I wrote down a list of motivators, and feel free to chime in with your own here. I have money written down as the motivator. A lot. I think that people like think is the big motivator. It's not. Title and rank. You know, sometimes like, you know, leveling up on the ladder is like super important for people. And like if somebody's like, yeah, I really want to get promoted to senior developer, like that's a motivator for them. It's like, let's lay out the path. That's point B. We know where point A is. Let's figure out how to get you to point B. Recognition. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes people just want to be seen. Autonomy. Yes. Great. Work-life balance is definitely motivating. I had that in here too. That's such a good one. I think that right now, especially with COVID, 2 years in this pandemic, people working from home don't know when to turn things off. I have a really hard time with that. Like, when am I done working? I don't really know anymore. Like, I just assume that everyone's thinking bad about me. And the truth is nobody's thinking about me, right? Like that's the honest truth. Is like, whatever. Predictability, right? Some people really need predictability and stability. And they just need to know that like they know what work will be like coming in tomorrow. And when you like are constantly shaking things up, that causes anxiety. And a lot of people don't respond really well to that. Learning new skills for sure. Predictability. Yep. Some people feed off chaos for sure. Mastery, autonomy, purpose is such a good one. Transparency. Sometimes people just want to know what's up. You know what I mean? Like they crave transparency. Like they want to understand the business. They want to understand their impact in the business. They want to know, what did me finishing this task in 24 hours versus 80 hours, how did that impact the business? Transparency is such a good one. Some people just want to know they're doing a good job. Fuck, I know it sounds crazy right now. Like, isn't that weird? Like for the software engineers in the room, do you know for sure you're doing a good job? It's such a weird question. Like, do you know that does your manager think you're on track, or does they think you're off track? It's such a weird thing. Camaraderie, I think I put as the very last. I want to actually address this other one too. Camaraderie is like the whole like, speed pack. Yeah. Like I put 40 hours into this thing. Call me back and let me know how I did, please. I think there's another big one too. I think socially driven, and I didn't really know what the right word for that was, but like some people, it's like a step beyond purpose, right? Like the work that I'm doing, like, am I making an impact on the greater good of humanity? I think is a really interesting thing. I always joke. I was like, man, like if NASA calls me, I'm going to go code for NASA, because like that's pushing fucking humanity forward. And that would be awesome. That would be a huge motivator for me. But here's the trick here, is that not everybody's the same. Everybody on your team is going to be completely and wildly different. And that's important to understand as a manager. And the other thing too, is it changes over time, right? Thinking back to this manager example I gave you before, kiddo on the way, all of a sudden he's family focused and he just like wants to work his 40 and dip. So if I was still his manager, the thing that I would ensure every week is that he is set up to clock and be done at 40 hours. And anybody who tried to do I would wildly protect him to make sure that he's not getting overloaded. And then once again, just, you can identify where they're at, identify the point B and put them on the path, motivate them to get to that place. But ultimately, if they do nothing with that, that is not on you. It's on them. And I think that sometimes, a lot of new managers will come to me and be like, well, okay, so Scott, I set up this learning plan and they're just not doing it. It's okay. Not everybody is wired that way. But I think at some point you're going to need to make the connection that the biggest barrier between where they want to be and where they are and where they want to be is going to be on them, right? Like the company doesn't owe you a promotion, right? I think it's your job as a manager. It's like to lay out the path to promotion, make sure that they're walking it and show them that they're walking it, or show them that they're not walking it, but ultimately they have to walk it. But I think enabling that path and showing, because like that's a big thing too, like how do I get to senior developer? and like you're gonna hear like, I don't know, you just kind of become a senior developer. That's such a weird thing. Okay. I want to make sure I hit this topic before I close out. Keep people safe, for the love of God. I think that this is such a like critically important part of the role. And like this means a lot of things. And so I just want to break this down really quick. First off, zero tolerance for the importance of just no zilch, nada, like any of that crap you can think of that like would be like no fly, like anything toxic, anything fucking just whatever. Like I just, you've seen it all. I feel like if you've ever worked professionally at all, or I mean, if you ever worked at all, you've seen some crazy stuff take place at the workplace. Like be excellent to each other, and anyone who's not excellent to another person, like they come under serious scrutiny. Like there's just the basic stuff. Nothing toxic, nothing like we're all humans and we all like should like need to lift each other up. So with that said, I think this is kind of another one that gets, I feel like this one like ends up crossing over with this one in some ways. And what I mean by this is that I run into some managers who treat this bucket a lot like they treat this bucket. What I mean by that is like, let's say you committed to completing a task in 16 hours and you came back to us and said, just kidding, it's 40. Like that's a business problem. That's not like that's like a growth opportunity, like a coachable moment. That's not like a zero tolerance, like, you know, like, so what I'm getting at here is like, make sure that as a manager, you can separate like the business stuff from the human. And I think that's super important. I talk about like this quite a bit with my management teams. I say, hey, listen, I was like, you need to clearly lay out your expectations. Like, don't ever let people guess what they're accountable to. Make sure that they just know like what they're accountable to, and that they have the visibility to see that they are on track or off track. And the job as a manager is if they are off track, you are helping them get on track. And you're doing that through coaching, you're doing that through support. Sometimes it's not even coaching. Sometimes it's like, I'm like overloaded right now because you as a manager overloaded me. Like, oh crap, you're right. Like, let me fix that for you. It's observing where your people are at and giving them the support they need. And this is such a critically important one because this is what servant-based leadership is all about. The teams that are the most successful, I typically see some manager working their butt off to make sure that their team is like incredibly and wildly supported. And so like really like when I see a successful team, some people killing it, I usually see a really awesome manager. Very rarely do I ever see a whole team that's killing it in a bad. I don't think I ever have. Actually, that's the lie. I don't think I've ever seen that where a team is doing a great job and somebody bad is at the helm. Once again, motivators are just different for everybody. I think, you know, when I think back to when I've been coached and trained or like, you know, course corrected, it always felt the best to get corrected by somebody who I felt like wasn't my superior, but my peer. Somebody who was like sitting there with me, who was like, yeah, gosh, you know, I didn't notice this either. Like, let's game plan, let's figure out how to get this back on track. And like, you know, what can we do together as a team to make sure that like, you know, we don't arrive at this situation again? Like, you know, this back to the 16-hour task taking 40 hours thing. It took me a long time and some good coaching to like learn that like, oh, I can like raise my hand at 3 hours in and be like, I can't get this done in 16 hours, yo. Like I'm going to need more time. And it just turns out that I was thinking about something the wrong way. And then I just need some fly-in support. And guess what? We got it done in 6. My point is that when you create psychological safety for people, when you make it okay to fail, when you make it okay, when the business side of things is separated from the human, this really cool thing happens where like that facade of being perfect, being the perfect employee, being the perfect manager, once that comes down and people are allowed to fail, I think like that's when shit gets really cool on a team, because all of a sudden we're lifting each other up when we are the weakest. And like, those are just incredible teams to be on. And they're typically a lot of fun. I feel safe. I feel protected. I feel like I'm growing. Especially when we get this piece right, when we know the whole team is bought into like helping each other and there's just gonna be no room for assholes. Like that feels awesome. A safe place. And you want to be the person who creates that safe place. People are always in progress. I think this is something that, you know, Rachel even had to remind me of this one. Today, as I was kind of putting together this talk, I was like, she's like, you know, one thing that I always need to keep in mind is that like, we change all the time, and your associates are going to change all the time. Your boss is going to change all the time. So even if you're a manager, like your manager is going to change too over time. And it's really important. And I think the word that Rachel used was amazing. And that was just like grace, and just extending like grace to the people that you manage, and understanding that they're going to get things wrong, and they're going to change their mind, what motivates them. They're going to like have a really good month, and then the next month they're going to be a mess. And having the grace to like just accept that, and like to roll with those punches, and like help that person. Once again, getting back, that servant-based leadership is so incredibly important. And then having the grace for yourself, that some days you're going to get this thing completely right, and other days you're going to get completely wrong. And then obviously like having grace for your boss as well too. I think that is extremely important. Coaching up, Sarah, I know I mentioned this, coaching up through one-on-ones, helping them. I think that like being a servant-based leader means like coaching up and down. Yeah, and that self-grace is so hard sometimes, because we are our hardest critic, right? Because like, back to the very beginning of this conversation, I had said, think back to when your manager said something that left you paralyzed for 2 weeks before you talked to them again. We don't want to be the kind of person that creates that for other people, but we also don't want to do it to ourselves. And so like, giving yourself the grace to say like, hey, like I'm going to get better at this over time. And I'm a brand new manager, or I'm heading into management, or I've been doing it for 10 years. People are hard. People are really hard, and you're going to get it wrong more often than you're going to get it right. But like investing and getting it right is what it's all about. All right, that brings us to the top of the hour. Very good to be back, by the way, doing Aftercamp. As always, we'll hang out a little bit for conversation and questions, but thank you so much for coming. It's been great getting back on the horse and doing this. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Michael. Good to see you, Sarah.
Hey, bud. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of what when I was hearing grace for yourself, I think for me being a manager in the past, I think the hardest part is knowing if you did right or you did wrong. Because unlike I work in QA, you know if it's a bug, you can just kind of write the ticket and fix the ticket, and you put the code to the problem, and then it gets fixed, and you just move on. I think the hardest part sometimes is not knowing if you did right or you did wrong. So having like that flexibility with yourself, especially in engineering type modes, we're so used to it being broken or not broken. There's never like a sense of nuance or like some sort of middle ground. So yeah, especially when dealing with humans, it's a bit of a fun time.
Yeah, and I think the thing that kind of keeps me going is that I feel like if you're truly engaged, right, if you're truly like really lay it out and say, I have your best interest in mind, but even like being vulnerable at the very beginning of that relationship as a manager, but like I promise you at some point I'm going to screw it up or misread something, like communicate with me. I think any great relationship is going to be built on communication and trust. And I think like saying, hey, I'm on this journey with you, and I don't want to make assumptions that I'm doing things right or wrong. So let me know when I get it wrong. Let me know when things are off. Even if you can't verbalize it like right in the moment, it'd be really important to know or get a sense of like when things aren't going. Even if you have to just say, hey, I had a bad day and I can't really put my finger on why, and I want to talk about it later. Like that's the kind of relationship you want to get to. But I also think like as a manager hearing that can be fucking freaky. Like, oh my God, this associate had a really bad day. So once again, I think that grace really is important there too. Like understanding like you're not going to get it perfect is.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, this is really great. And what's nice about it too, is one thing that you had mentioned a bit ago is having something to talk about. It was funny. It was almost like 1, 2, 3 of my one-on-ones scheduled on a Monday. Schedule your one-on-ones on Monday. In case you do need to bump them, you still have a little bit of time. But yeah, that we just all 3 of them that happened right in a row were like wondering if their life should fork into management or stay kind of in technical architecture. and I was like, let's read a book. Let's read Camille Fournier's book, The Manager's Path. Highly recommended for anybody considering management or even mentoring. And I've reread it multiple times to see like how to coach new managers, but also like, do I want to be VP? Am I just going to be QA for the rest of my life? But it was funny because then I opened it up to other folks too. And a lot of different people wanted that reinvestment in their time, have that community. So yeah, I have a DevOps person, I have a platform person in my little reading group. I'll put the book in the chat here. I've actually bought the book, the hardcover book. Mine is dog-eared and highlighted and sad looking now. But I've bought the book now like 11 or 12 times for the folks that I've managed in the past. Manager's Path. There we go.
There's been quite a few books that Rachel and I have, I think we purchased about the same amount of times. And like, we just, like, because what a book, like I don't know, a book is such a fun little thing to give because like they're $12, 15 bucks maybe. And like, you hand it to somebody and you're like, man, I thought about you. Like gifts are a really powerful thing for people. I feel like, I think it's often overlooked. I got in the habit of just like, hey, I don't need your home address, but if I get a mailing address, that'd be great. And so like, we'll be having a conversation, like they'll forget that they give it to me and I'll be having a conversation. We'll be talking about hot sauce. And then like 2 days later, they have hot sauce that, it costs me like $6 to buy the hot sauce, but it feels good. It feels good to like, know that like, they or I mean something more than just like, our bi-weekly scuttled one-on-one to like do business. It's more than that.
Well, I think too, it's again, that meaningfulness bridge that you're talking about, for something like this, I'm kind of saying like, hey, you know what? I care about you. I know you're trying to figure out your next step, especially as a senior, but this worked for me. And I think maybe it could help you out too. That's like even if it's hot sauce or it's the gift of a book, just be like, I have this knowledge. I found this useful. This might be for you too. Also, it's good to read anyway and learn how to manage up. Teach your managers how to manage, especially newbie devs.
Yeah, you'd be surprised too. I think that a lot of people make this assumption. It's like our parents growing up, right? Like, at some level, a lot of us held our parents in high regard growing up, and that they were like, like infallible. And like, I think once you get to be an adult, you're like, oh fuck, you guys are just figuring out just like I am right now as a parent. I think the same is true for management. It's like, you're like, oh fuck, this person like is learning on me, and like that's like a really hard scenario. But like once again, I talked about the Sala talk earlier. The second piece in Sala after self-awareness is humility as part of growth. And I think that like looking at everything as an opportunity to grow, even the situation where you're having a newbie manager who you might not be getting exactly what you want from. I think that there's still something to learn there. It's probably just not the thing you wanted to learn at that moment. But like being humble enough to accept that lesson, I think it's super important.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Plus Once Atomic Habits. I love that book. That was a really good one. I usually got my laundry list of books sitting in my bookshelf. We are relocating from Kansas City back to Minneapolis in April. And so everything is packed up and I don't know where anything is right now.
In April. Good. In
Yeah.
April. Not in January or February.
Yeah, we moved out of Minnesota in October to Phoenix when we moved out of Minnesota. So we timed that beautifully. And then we got out of Phoenix in June. So we timed that beautifully, only to find out that actually Kansas City's hotter than Phoenix. Or at least it feels hotter. But we cannot wait to get out of here. So no, we don't mean that. I just don't like the humidity. So I'm like not looking forward to, I'm trying to get out before the humidity kicks in. My Kansas City people know what I'm talking about.
Also out of the small apartment.
Yeah. What was that, Timothy?
When's mosquito season?
Always. Rachel's not looking forward to that.
No.
All right, friends. Well, I'm gonna go hang out with the kiddo. Thank you all for coming. Next time we're doing XR, so we're talking VR, AR, MR. I feel like I've been talking about it for like almost a decade, and like I feel like this wave is about to hit us really hard. So I'm going to bring you into the loop on why I think it's worth paying attention to. I'm going to bring you into bring you into the conversation on some of the technologies that power it, and why it's going to make a big splash. So I'm going to build a case for VR, MR, AR, and why if you're going to be deving 5 years from now, you should really have your finger in it a little bit. All right. Thank you so much. And we will see you guys in a month.